Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me and my books and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children, and Raised by These Wolves, Volume 2, Child Trafficking Through Foster Care and Court Systems, which will be coming out July 19th of 2024. And please feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going, and that will be in the podcast notes. I have a brand new guest on. I have Julie Andrews. She's a 59-year-old mother of 5 adult children who have all been alienated from her. Although her ex-husband and she both grew up in California, he was in the Navy, and they spent most of their 20-year marriage on the East Coast. She's also a survivor of domestic abuse. Her ex-husband would choke her, and when she was 31 years old, she started having seizure as a result of this incident. Now, her 3 oldest children grew up not only in fear of their father, but they were taught that the mother was not worth loving, and it made it easy for him to alienate them from their mother. Now, their 2 youngest were only 8 and 5 years old when he moved 3,000 miles away from them and moved in with his mother. They saw a counselor regularly who wrote letters stating that the daughters would come home from their summer visits with their father, emotionally traumatized, that everyone in California was taught to hate their mother. I welcome you, Julie Andrews. I'm very sorry that you have gone through this as so many of us have. How did all of that evolve after, you know, those summers?
Well, when my husband left me and divorced me, we went through a 2-year divorce, and he was determined to get full custody of our 3 youngest who were still under 18. Um, he did not get that. My 2 youngest daughters um, would would tell their school counselor that they we had a guardian ad litem, but the guardian ad litem was very much on my husband's side, and my 2 little girls were afraid of her, so they never said anything around her. And so they went to the school counselor and told the school counselor that they wanted to still see their father, but they didn't want to stay the night with him. That they wanted to live with their mommy and have their bedroom at their mommy's house.
Mhm, mhm.
And so when the guardian ad litem put in her report and everything, of course, she wanted my husband to have custody of them. And so the judge, because I had teachers that were on the witness stand and stuff for me, the judge gave us joint custody, and it was an odd custody where I had them on from Monday after school until Friday morning when they got back on the bus. And then he had them Friday after school when they got off the bus and put them back on the bus on Monday morning. So he got them on the weekends on the fun time, and I had them when they were at school in
Same
the
here.
week.
Same here.
It was the oddest thing. And then on top of it, he got 2 weeks vacation in the summer with them, which I did not get. So after he didn't get full custody of them, he premeditated everything, which just blows my mind how they can premeditate everything. He quit his job,
Mhm.
and then for about almost 6 months he didn't pay rent. And so because he knew it didn't matter to him if they kicked him out, he was gonna up and leave with them when he had them for his 2 weeks vacation. So why pay rent? So he already had you know he was being kicked out, which I didn't know any of this because my children were told not to tell me anything that was going on. So then when he had the kids for their 2-week vacation, what he did was he sent um, my two oldest daughters on an airplane with my two youngest daughters, and then he and my son took a U-Haul and drove it across country with their things in it. And he left his car here. Then he flew back with my two younger ones and dropped them off and had his car all loaded up and waiting to go. And he dropped him off and he got in his car and he drove off. And I had no idea. I was so clueless. I was utterly in the dark. Like I never even saw it coming. Like I thought he loved his kids so much that he was fighting for custody because he wanted them, not to up and leave them. And so when they walked into the house that day, my next youngest burst into tears and said, "Mommy, do you hate us? Do you hate us?" And I was going, What are you talking about?" And she said, "Daddy moved to California." And I said, "No, he didn't." And she said, "Yes, he did." And then my younger one, who's on the autism spectrum, she just says it like it is. And she said, "Yep, I don't have a daddy anymore." Just like that.
So they just up and left.
Yeah, he just up and left.
Oh.
Just like that. And he took my son with him, who I had joint custody of, but he lived with his dad. But I had joint custody of him too. So I called my attorney, and there was nothing. She said there was nothing I could do. Now they say that I could have filed because he went over state lines with my son and I had joint custody. But it took me 6 months to even get into court. And by then, I mean, it was the same biased judge. And he was like, "Well, he's, reacclimated to California. He's fine where he is. He can stay there. And you can see him during the summer when, we'll switch out him and the girls. The girls will go to California for the summer and see their dad." I mean, it was just crazy to me. And then he found him in contempt of court, but he didn't punish him in any way because he said, "Well, he has no money. He doesn't even have a job," because he quit his job. And he's living with his mother. And everything that he testified to in court, now it obviously was a lie. And the judge didn't say, "Well, you obviously lied when you were going through your divorce because you're living with your mom." Yeah, and so nothing happened to him. So the first year that my son was there, he would email me on the computer and he would tell me that he wanted me to sign him up for free lunches at school because he didn't have time to make his lunches at school for school. And I said, "Well, make them the night before and put them in the refrigerator." Well, then I came to find out through my young daughters that he had to buy his own food and he had to get a job. He was 13 years old and he had to get a job to buy his own food, and that all the kids in the house put their initials on all of their food. And my ex-husband was going out every single day and buying meals for himself, like through fast food, and you knew it was just for one person because breakfast was like $3 at McDonald's and $5 for lunch and $5 for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And he wasn't feeding his children. And then when the girls went there for summer the first time, they came back and I said, "How do you eat?" And they both said, "Well, we can eat anything, anybody's food. It doesn't matter if it has a Z on it for Zachary or a C for Caitlin. We can eat anybody's food." I just couldn't believe it. So we went back to court because I said to my attorney, "My son is starving.
Mm-hmm.
He can't even get free lunches at school because his dad won't sign him up." And his father refused to work because he didn't want to pay child support to me or anything, which he was court ordered to. And so we went back to court, and they allowed my ex-husband to be on the telephone. It wasn't Zoom or anything like that because this was in the early 2000s.
Gotcha.
And he was on the phone. And So he's on the phone, and my attorney asks him, so, so do you buy food for all of the whole family? And he said, yes. So I need my child support reduced. Well, we had court ordered all of his bank accounts, and you could see where there was no grocery shopping anywhere, not at Walmart, Target, any grocery store, no big shopping. All there was him going out and buying these fast food restaurants 3 times a day for himself. So then he said, my attorney said, so you don't, so the kids don't buy their own food and put their initials on it. Well, my husband was so shocked that we knew that there was a pause before he said, we are a family, not a business. That was his answer. We are a family, not a business. Never answered the question. And it's despicable to me that his mother, their grandmother, allowed my children to starve.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure this happens a lot.
I can't imagine it. My grandmothers would have taken me in and fed me until I was 300 pounds. They
Mm-mm.
wouldn't have they wouldn't have had me going out and buying food. And in fact, when I was in college, my grandmas were so worried that I wasn't eating, they would always hand me $10 bills when I saw them. Here, buy some food. Here, buy some food, you know. And that was in the 80s, you know.
Right. Oh,
They weren't allowed to talk to my dad. My dad lived only about 20 minutes from where they were living with their grandmother. And my father would go to their work and leave messages, hey, you know, can I take you out to dinner? Can I see you? And they wouldn't respond because they weren't allowed to, because he wasn't on their father's side. So nobody that spoke to me, they didn't speak to. So it's not just that you get alienated, it's that my father got alienated. My father died
mm.
with a broken heart. He would ask me, what did I do? And I said, you didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And he's like, I don't understand this, you know, and he cried. It's devastating to everybody. And you can't, and you tell people what is happening, and they just say, well, just keep showing your kids that you love them, and it won't happen to them. But I could see it happening to my next youngest daughter. You know, every time she would come back, it was worse. Every time she would start rocking back and forth, and she would cry hysterically, and she would tell me the last time she went was in 2017 for her brother's wedding that I was not invited to. And she came home. Well, first of all, my ex-husband didn't put them on the plane to come home. So I had to get the California DA's office involved, and the sheriff showed up at his mom's house and she answered the door and asked for him, and she said, oh, they're camping. And he said, well, he needs to have those kids on an airplane tomorrow morning or he's going to be arrested. Suddenly, they were home. Amazing how that works.
Magically.
Yeah. So he sent them back, but I had to pay for their tickets because he said, I don't have the money. And so I had to pay $1,000 to get them back home. When I got them back home, Jillian was just traumatized. I mean, she was rocking back and forth, and I had to call her counselor at 8 o'clock at night to come to our house because she was threatening to cut herself and run away and tell the police that I had done it. So her counselor came to my house, and my youngest daughter, who's on the autism spectrum, was pacing back and forth all over the house and shaking and saying, she's not going to really do it, right? She's not really going to do it. And I said, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Well, The counselor said to her, if I can't leave this house knowing that you're not going to hurt yourself, I'm going to put you in a 48-hour hold. And my daughter all of a sudden just looked at her and said, what? You would do that? And she said, absolutely. She said, your mother is not hurting you, and I will not let you hurt yourself and then blame it on her. She said, your father is emotionally abusing you. This is abuse. And she said, but he said it's the only way for me to move out there with him where I'm safe. And she said, how are you not safe with your mother? And she said, I don't know. He says I'm not safe. And she said, you have been here for 10 years with your mother. And she just kept saying, but he says I'm not safe.
That's very common when they teach the kid to fear and hate the other parent. It's very insidious too.
But she lived here, both of them,
Yeah.
the whole year. And then she would go to his house and he would do that in just a matter of weeks,
Yes.
convince her that I was dangerous.
I totally get it. That's kind of what happened to me as well. They install fear, a false narrative into their heads of something that didn't even happen. It is severe child psychological abuse.
Yeah.
And, the APA wrote, I think that was in 2014, that child psychological abuse is worse than physical and sexual combined because they are actually altering the child's personality.
He is.
Yes.
He would not allow my oldest daughter to date. And, we had agreed that when our kids were 16, they could start dating. And we were still married when our oldest daughter turned 16 and our second oldest daughter turned 16. And she wanted to date and he would not let her. And I kept saying, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. And he said, no, she's not going to date. She's too young. And everything that he would tell her she couldn't do, she wouldn't do. But yet, then when he left, she was she went with him, and I was the bad guy. It blew my mind.
Mhm.
And then she would, and she still to this day, she would send messages to the younger sisters and tell them, mom is evil, she's trying to control you. And I would say, how am I trying to control you? And yet, and my oldest daughter could never tell them. Well, my younger daughter, after Jillian graduated, they gave her a one-way ticket to California and she went. And he changed her phone number and he wouldn't let her call me or contact me or anything. And then 2 years later, Abby was getting ready to graduate and she was on the autism spectrum, is on the autism spectrum. And she was failing her classes and COVID had hit. And so she didn't do well, on the computer. And so I had gotten her a caseworker and I found out that she was getting these messages from her siblings saying, we've got a one-way ticket for you. So after you graduate, have all of your bags packed and we'll come by and pick them up and pick you up. And then we'll leave first thing in the morning, all this stuff. I said to her, what is going on? I said, do you want this? And she said, no. And I said, well, why don't you tell them that? And she said, I'm afraid that if I tell them that, they'll make everybody hate me the way they make everybody hate you.
Mm.
That was just the most profound thing
Mhm.
she ever said to me. I was shocked. So then the caseworker told me to go to an attorney and get a a guardianship of her for during that time so that I could, if they did try to kidnap her, I could get her back. So I did. It was for 6 months, and the attorney talked to her alone, like I wasn't there, to make sure that that was what she wanted, that I wasn't trying to control her or abuse her. And Abby signed the paperwork. And when they came, the auditorium isn't that big. We live in Maine. And I never even saw them at all in the auditorium. And then she gets a phone when we were leaving after graduation. She gets a phone call to meet her dad at his car. He has a present for her. And I said, "Well, where's his car?" And she said, "I don't know." He said to just start walking and he would direct me. So I started following her, but he had her keep going in between cars. And then all of a sudden, he jumped out between two cars, grabbed her, and threw her in the back of his car and drove off. Like, I can't even think of these crazy things to do like that.
Right. You can't make it up.
And if I had known, I would have had my camera going and stuff. But I'm thinking he's going to give her a present. And we were having a graduation party for her that night. And I even said to, tell them they can come over, and he took her. And then she called me from the bathroom of wherever she was, and she said, "I don't know where I am." And she said, "Please come get me." And I said, "But I can't come get you if I don't know where you are."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Will he take you to the police station?" She said, "No." So then she she gave a description of it. So then I figured out where she was, and then I told her, "I'm calling the police. I have that guardianship paperwork that says that I am your guardian.
Mm-hmm.
So you better tell him he either meets me at the police station or I'm calling the police, and they're going to be on the lookout for him." So he took her to the police station to drop her off, and then he said, "You have until midnight to bring her back with her suitcases." Of course, that wasn't happening.
Mm-mm.
So then the next morning, he calls and he says to her, "Jillian wants to go shopping with you with her friend, and her friend will drive. So she asked me if she could go." And I said, "Yes." So I said, "So Jill's friend is going to drive up and pick you guys up?" And she said, "Yes." Well, then a car drives up, and my best friend was here, and we're looking out the window, and I said, "That's not her best friend, that's her dad." And she said, "Yep." And I said, "And Jillian's not in the car." So we went and told Abby, and she said, "No, I'm sure he's just going to take us over there." And I said, "Abby, he's not taking you over there." So she opened the front door and she walked out there. And as she starts to get in the front seat of the car, she sort of looks and then she gets in the back. So I said, "Somebody's in the front seat of the car, down." She gets in the back seat of the car. We watch, she sits for a while, and then all of a sudden she jumps out of the back seat of the car, comes running into the house, and starts crying, saying, "They told me I have to pack my bags right now and leave with them." And I said, "No, you're not." And she said, "They said I have to. I don't know what to do. I guess I'll pack my bags. I'll pack my bags." And I said, "No, you're not." So I called her caseworker, and he called the police, and I called the police, and then the police came over, and of course the police in our town are very biased. There's a couple wife beaters in there and everything. So they came over and they start yelling at me, "You're trying to keep her from her father." And I said, "I am not trying to keep her from her father." And he said, "Well, we want to talk to her alone." And I said, "Go right ahead." So they took her over to the side. They talked to her for a few minutes, and then finally they walked over, and then they said, "Yeah, she doesn't want to go, but she wants you to leave her alone too," like that, and yelled at me. And I was like, I said, "Okay." So then the police walked over to my ex-husband's car, and he had been recording the whole thing, of course, and they spoke to him and said that he needed to leave, that she didn't want to go, da 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 da. So they left. Later that night, they came back over to my house in the middle of the night, and were flashing flashlights in my windows to try to get Abby's attention because her bedroom faces the front of the street. She knew it, she saw it, and she went into my best friend's room and got in bed with her. And my best friend said, "Did you see those lights being flashed in the windows?" I said, "Oh, yeah, they were trying to get her attention." They wouldn't stop at anything.
Mm-mm.
So I went on to try to get guardianship of her because her caseworker told me that it would be that I needed to do that anyways so that she could get services, and get college. Um, so we discussed it with Abby, and we were going to get her schooling and everything, and I had her tested, and her her score tested like she was like a 12 to 13-year-old,
Mm.
that she was high functioning, that she could figure things out, and she knew what was going on, but maturity wise she just wasn't mature. And so I filled out the paperwork and we were going to court, and then these people who I believed were my friends, they needed the money, and they were getting guardianship of their adopted foster daughter. And so they worked with my ex-husband and started telling her that I was going to control her and abuse her and all of this. And she ended up at their house and they wouldn't let me in to get her. And they convinced her I was dangerous. And they filed guardianship paperwork for her. And I went through 2 years of hell. And instead, I asked that she not have a guardian and everything. And the people even filed a restraining order against me. And my daughter didn't even, she was on the witness stand, she didn't even understand why she didn't get Christmas presents or birthday presents from me.
Mhm.
You know, it was because I couldn't send them to her, and and so I fought to get her no guardianship, and then right before our third hearing, the people came with me with a plea deal, and the plea deal was if I gave them full guardianship of my daughter, they would drop the restraining order against me. But Adult Protective Services had already done a full investigation on me and said they found no evidence of abuse, none at all.
Mhm.
And she was testifying to that. And so I was scared to death. And my attorney, of course, attorneys go for plea deals. They like everything done just quick and easy. And she scared me and she said, "I think you should just go for the plea deal because, if you get that restraining order, and abuse on you, you could have that for 3 years on you. You would lose your job because I take care of elderly people." I was scared to death. And I almost signed it, and I'm glad I didn't. But in that plea deal, it was that they would get $500 a month for taking care of my daughter, which is what I said all along to the judge. They want her for money.
Yeah, kids for
Right. And he kept saying, "Oh, no, I believe they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart." Well, you know what? 2 months after the judge said, "I believe they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart and they don't need to have guardianship of her," she was gone out of the state of Maine, and she's gone. I haven't seen or heard from her.
I'm so sorry.
And they even testified, the father of the couple, he testified that they don't even allow her. My daughter was 20 years old at the time he testified to this, that they don't even allow my daughter to have her phone in her bedroom. And if she's caught with it in her bedroom, they take it away from her as punishment. 20 years old, and she's not allowed to use her phone in the privacy of her bedroom. And I'm the one that was abusing her and controlling her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The coercive control that they had over her, it's like being in a cult.
Right. It's exactly that. Even people even said to me, it's like your husband has a cult or something. And I said, I know. And not only that, but my daughter had a boyfriend before all this started. She no longer could see him. She had a best friend that she knew since kindergarten. She wasn't allowed to see him anymore. Everybody that disagreed with what they were doing, they cut her off from.
Typical. That's so typical behavior.
They isolated her. She had no way to get anywhere where she lived because these people lived way out in the middle of nowhere. There was no grocery store around, there was nothing. She didn't even have a bike that she could ride anywhere. And if she did ride a bike somewhere, it would be miles. I live in town, you know, and she has a bike, and I was trying to get her, her driver's license and make her, be self-sufficient, and they took that all away from me, and now she's dependent on who knows where, what she's doing, how she is.
That's so wrong. And how old are they now?
My youngest just turned 21, and then my next daughter will be 24 in September. My son just turned 29, and then my two oldest daughters will be 35 and 33 at the end of the year.
How devastating.
And people, my ex-husband's friends make comments on Facebook like, oh, we're so happy that the outcome was good for you, Abby, and that your mom won't be controlling you anymore. They don't even know me. They have no idea,
Mm.
you know? And
Well,
if I was truly abusing them, a teacher would have reported me. Their Girl Scout leader would have reported me. Their dance teacher, their music teacher, somebody would have reported me.
right, right. Well, these people that are personality disorders that do this to kids, they tell their friends whatever, and their friends just blindly believe whatever
Yeah,
this person says instead of saying, gee, I know Julie, I've known her for the last 12 years. I'm going to go talk to Julie. But they
right,
can't think for themselves. It's amazing.
right. They can't. They
No,
believe him because he's like charismatic and he's funny and he can throw out the jokes. But my oldest daughter started dating this kid. I mean, he's a kid to me, when they were in their 20s. And she dated him for like 6 years. And when they broke up, his sister said to my nephew, there is something seriously wrong with her father. He has a weird amount of control over her. And my nephew said, really? And she said, yes. She said, I wouldn't doubt it if he molests her. And I was like, what? And I just panicked me. I said, do you think that's going on? And he said, I don't know, but she really thinks there's something seriously wrong with him. And that was the first time somebody outside the box could look in and say, this guy is not okay. There's something wrong with him.
oh, it's just terrible. Yeah, it's like, I don't like it when anyone says anything bad about me when you haven't spoken to me and got my side of the story.
Right.
I don't know why these people who had been friends for over 10 years suddenly take a side without talking to the other person and saying, what happened? I don't, maybe they don't have the guts. I don't know.
I don't understand it either.
And I
But
understand.
it's happening to parents everywhere.
Yes.
everywhere. I never even heard of it when it happened to me. And when we were going through our divorce, I didn't even realize it, but he was filming everything.
Mm.
And even the things like we had to go to mandatory mediation, and we were in there not even 2 minutes when he came across the table at my attorney, and the mediator was just freaking out, saying, "Get your client under control, get your client under control." And then as soon as he sat back down, the mediator got up and left and wrote a note to the judge saying, "I cannot mediate with these two." But the judge never heard why. Shouldn't that have been in there?
Yes.
Shouldn't he have known?
Yeah, that mediator obviously sucked, and the mediator should have told the judge exactly what happened, because then the judge should have ruled that you would get full custody based
Right,
on that violent behavior.
right.
And even, you know, co-parent counseling, my first attorney told me that the counselor said that he's volatile. I'm going,
Uh-huh.
oh, but no one told the judge that. No
Right.
one's telling the judge.
And the guardian ad litem didn't care. Like when the judge ordered, because my dad had set up bank accounts for each of my kids. There was $15,000 in there, and he wasn't paying his attorney. And so the attorney asked the judge if he could borrow that money. And the judge said, "Absolutely not. That is their money." So
Wow.
we came back 2 months later, that money was gone. It was gone. The judge did nothing about it. And so I went up to the guardian ad litem and I said, "Aren't you concerned that this man, the father who is supposed to protect his children, isn't paying child support? And then he not only isn't paying child support, but he stole $15,000 from his own children." And she said, this is her words. She said to me, "Well, I don't know what he needed to buy them. He might have needed to buy winter coats for them." I said, $15,000 winter coats? I bought their winter coats, first of all. And that's crazy. And she
So
just turned and walked away.
so that 15,000 was in your bank account?
He was in the Navy, and my dad had set up bank accounts for them when they were born, and we just put it in Navy Federal Credit Union because he was in the Navy, and it has to have an adult name on it. So it had his name on their accounts. But I didn't think that he could actually take it out of there. I mean, it was their account. So I went into Navy Federal Credit Union and I was just screaming. And they said, "There's nothing you can do." He transferred it into his own personal bank account. I got all the records to show it. Did not matter. The judge didn't care. The guardian ad litem didn't care. They did not care. My children didn't care. They were like, "Well, dad's having a hard time because he has to pay you child support." I said, "He isn't paying me child support. He's supposed to, but
Uh,
he isn't paying me child support." And they were like, "No, dad tells us that he's paying you child support and that you would say that." I had all the records, all the documents to show, but my kids believed him over me. It was like, I don't get this.
I'm so sorry, because that happened. It happens to a lot of parents that are being alienated, and it's what that parent says. And he had that 15,000, so he probably gave them money to appease them, bought them off a little bit, probably, because I'm sure that's what mine did, and a lot of other ones do, is they financially control them.
Hmm.
Oh, if you're upset, oh, if you're mad at me, here, I'll give you $1,000. He may have done that too.
Oh, he took them, to ice cream and things like that. He wasn't paying his attorney. And so when his attorney found out that he took that $15,000 and they didn't get a penny of it, they asked to be excused from representing him. And the judge said no, because he wouldn't be able to find another attorney. I thought, what? I have to continue paying mine, but he gets a free one?
Then why didn't his attorney, if he had a brain, say, you know what, we can't represent him because he's violent and he jumped over a table to go after her attorney?
I don't know.
Why wasn't that pointed out? You know what, they probably would have gotten paid then.
Yeah, I don't know. But he didn't get paid and he was not happy. And then when he didn't get full custody of the girls, he their lawyer even told my lawyer, yeah, he then called us and was screaming on the phone at us that we were lousy lawyers, we didn't do our job, and just went on and on. They said that people in their waiting room could hear him screaming on the phone. And I said, yeah, that's what I put up with for 20 years.
Right. Welcome
He
to
would
my
choke
world.
me. Yeah, he would choke me until I was unconscious. He choked me 4 days before I gave birth to my youngest daughter. I mean,
And now all of this has happened.
yeah, and and I don't even know where my kids are. And what do you do about it? How do you do, all so now I'm part of a nonprofit organization, um, advocates for the falsely accused, and I'm trying my best to get the word out there before it happens to other people, because once it happens to you, it's too late.
Hmm.
You have to stop it before it happens. And we have to get laws changed. We have to get legislatures to realize this is a real thing. And these people that do this to the other parent and to their children, they're psychopaths.
Hmm.
I mean, I could never come up with these these things to do that he has done to me. Every time he does something else, I think, wow, where does he think of these things?
They're very creative. The thing is, how do you stop it before it's too late? Because even in my case, it was so insidious that I didn't even see it coming. I didn't know the warning signs. I look back and
Right.
now I kind of see some signs, but I don't know even if I could have stopped it then.
I think that we have to teach people, males and females, because it happens to both, what to look for. Because now when I look back, I realize that his mom alienated him and his sister from his dad's family.
Mm.
And so he already had that in him. And when I look back at when my three oldest were really little, I could see her jealousy of my dad and my family, that everything had to be at her house and under her control. And she always, and she didn't have the money to spend on Christmas presents, but she would go overboard to try to, you know, manipulate my kids into liking her more as a grandparent by giving them the better presents, the bigger presents, things like that. And so you have to look at the warning signs of the in-laws first, because it's a family thing. I mean, I wasn't raised in a family like that on either side. And my parents didn't get divorced, but if they had, neither of my grandparents would have been like that.
Yeah, you make a very awesome point there because when you get married, you really have to study these in-laws. And young people, when you're young and you're in your 20s and you're looking forward to getting married, if the mother-in-law or father-in-law is weird or they have a criminal history, run the other way.
Right.
I remember, and this is a quick story, but the mother-in-law, the future mother-in-law, came out and said, "Oh, tell me about your dress," because I had just gotten my wedding gown. And, and so I told her, and she just gave me this flat affect, looked right at me, and it was really crazy. She just turned around and walked into her bedroom and proceeded to bawl her head off.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, okay. And my future husband was downstairs in the wood shop. And I went outside and swung on the swing, like, what do I do? This is like disturbing me. This is disturbing. I don't know what to do about it. And unfortunately, I went ahead with it. And I knew within 15 months I should have gotten a divorce. Because another interesting fact was that his mother, he told me he was going to meet his parents for lunch at a park near where he worked. And the outcome of that meeting was everything was my fault and her depression was caused by me. And that was a warning sign to leave.
Right. It is. It is.
So you and I serve as, I hate to say it, but a warning beacon
Right.
to these young people need to be taught what personality disorders are and what they can do to you for the rest of your life.
Right. Right. And if, and I saw my ex-husband's anger towards his mom and his sister.
Yes,
And
yes.
but I didn't realize it was as deep as it was. And then I realized after we had married, he didn't want to marry a white girl. He liked Asian girls, but his mom would not allow him to marry an Asian girl. And I thought, this is really weird, like that he did not want to marry me. He only dated me because I fit his mom's, profile. This is what she wanted him to marry. So he agreed to it because he didn't know how to not do what she wanted. And
Mhm.
then his first affair on me was with an Asian girl, and then it all started falling into place.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
now, then when I found out my son, his first girlfriend was an Asian girl, I knew he was doing it to please his dad. And I couldn't believe the control.
Oh, definitely the control is if I had only known, had I only known, we all say this, hindsight is 2020. Um, Now I'd like to have you come back onto this podcast and talk some more about all of this too, because these when you're dating and these in-laws, you've got to watch extremely close. I'm so glad you brought that up. But tell me a little bit more about this Advocates for the Falsely Accused.
So we're a nonprofit organization, and um, and it can be because I was falsely, how I got into it was because I was, at the time, I was being falsely accused of, abusing my daughter and everything, and I was terrified. I not only could I not see my daughter, and I cried hysterically every night, but I loved my job, and I couldn't imagine losing my job and not having, my job. What would I do? And so I got into this group, and I found out that there were people in there, that were falsely accused of all kinds of things, that had been in jail, were possibly going to jail. And there were people in there that, were alienated parents just like me.
Mhm.
And I found a connection, and we have an event in September for Falsely Accused Day in Sacramento, California, and we want people to tell their stories, especially when you're being an alienated parent. Of course, one of the things they're going to do is accuse you of things you haven't done to get the kids away from you.
Mhm.
I recently became the secretary of the nonprofit, um, and I think that when you go through something so devastating as having your kids believe these evil things about you that aren't true, and you don't even know where they are or how they are or if they're married or have kids, you have to find something to do to help other people and try to prevent this from happening to other people. And there has to be laws changed. Guardian ad litem have to be held accountable for the lies that they tell and in their reports about you. And policemen, everybody, they need to go to classes to know what to look for. You
You
know,
know, I say we get rid of these third-party parasites.
oh yeah, guardian ad litems are worthless,
Yes,
worthless,
get rid of
and
them.
they are evil. I mean, at one point, my guardian ad litem, just a few months into being guardian ad litem, she called an emergency hearing to take my children away and give them to their father. So when we went in there, um, my kids had left on a Saturday afternoon and they came back to me on a Wednesday night, and our hearing was that Friday morning. So when they came back on Wednesday night, I had put a braid in each of my daughter's hair, just a small braid on the side, like this, on Saturday morning. When they came back on Wednesday night, that braid was still there. So I got my camera and I took pictures of it. And I said to my daughter, wow, your braid is still in your hair. And she said, Mommy, you would be so proud of me. Every morning I got up and I lifted my braid up carefully and combed all around it and put it back down. And I did it for Abby too, her little sister. And so I took those pictures. Then when they went to school, I went to the counselor and I said, I need you to talk to the girls and ask them when the last time was they had a bath and when the last time was they changed their underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me they didn't change their underwear the whole time they were there or have a bath. So when we went into that emergency hearing, I had my picture, gave it to my attorney. He walked up to the guardian ad litem. She was on the stand and he said, so how long do you think a braid should stay in a child's hair? And she said, I don't know. And he said, well, like a day, 2 days. She said, I guess a day. And he flipped that picture down in front of her and he said, her mom's going to testify that that braid stayed in that child's hair from Friday morning until Wednesday back night when she came back from her dad's house. And
Oh,
she's going to testify she never changed her underwear the whole time or had a bath. And the judge went, oh, okay, I've heard enough. Everybody in my chambers. And they were in there for 20 minutes, a half an hour. When they came out, the judge said, do not call me in for an emergency hearing to take children away from their mother when their father is not bathing them, combing their hair. He said, I've heard quite enough.
well,
So I think for my kids.
good for. How can people reach you if they have any questions?
My email is julesland5, JULESLAND, and the number 5 at AOL.com. As you can see, I'm old. An AOL account.
That's okay. Well, hey,
And
go ahead.
and I'm on Facebook too, and I have no problem talking to people on Facebook. They can leave a message on there, whatever. I will respond if they have questions, if anything. And our organization is www.theaffa.org.
I'll put that in the podcast notes, but hey, don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
Well, on the Gavels, a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, and you can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going, and you can find that in the podcast notes. And everyone have a great day. And thank you so much, Julie, for speaking out. Thank you so much.